Hello, my name is Austin. I'm the director here at Fishtown Films. You can see our work here on our channel, or you can check out our feature, Citywide, now streaming on Amazon and Vimeo. I'll put the link in the description down below. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Stumble Upon. I'm Austin.
And I'm Emily. Today we are discussing State and Main, written and directed by David Mamet.
As always, there will be plenty of swearing and spoilers.
But if that doesn't scare you, the potholes should, because the only second chance you get is the chance to make the same mistake twice.
This episode brought to you by Citywide, now streaming on Amazon.
Rent or purchase tonight, host a movie night, invite all your friends over, and know that every dollar spent on supporting indie filmmakers like us helps us make the next sapphic indie.
So before we begin, and before we truly jump in, did you know that the actor who plays the assistant to William H. Macy, who's writing on the board, is Sarah Silverman's sister? She's also in Bob's Burgers. She does the voices of Andy and Ollie.
My goodness, I had no idea. I mean, I knew she played either Andy or Ollie. I'm not sure which one she plays, but I didn't know that about Bob's Burgers, but I didn't know that about State and Main.
Yeah, it's credited. She's credited on IMDb as both Andy and Ollie, and I think that Sarah Silverman is also credited as both Andy and Ollie, so they might be playing both the voices. I don't know. Those characters are so interchangeable, it really doesn't matter.
I imagine that they don't. They write I could just see that every script is written Andy or Ollie says this line.
Yep. And they just pick. Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And maybe nobody knows who's playing what anyway.
I think I bring that up because the thing about talking about this film is that you can't really jump into the film without addressing David Mamet and his presence in both American theater history and his presence now in where he's kind of leaned politically and with his life.
I think what we discussed prior to starting this is, how do you remove the art from the artist?
Yeah.
When do we explore the idea that the art can exist on its own without the artist and their life choices being part of the conversation?
Right.
When do they need to be part of the conversation, and when can you extract them from the art? And what I love about this film for using that conversation as a vehicle to talk about that conversation is the fact that it shows how many people are involved in making a movie.
Yeah.
There are so many people that go behind making a film. It's not the same as writing a book. It's not the same as painting a painting. It's not the same as writing a song. Mm-hmm. It is a huge collaborative effort with a large ensemble. No matter how low budget you are, there are still a lot of people involved in making a movie. And so when does the auteur theory come into play? And why do we give so much credit to the director and so little credit to everyone else that's involved in making the film?
It's something that the French New Wave has done both a credit and a discredit to by coining the auteur theory and creating this idea of a director as somebody who is the overseer of everything that is in a film, even though you have films made by French New Wave artists like Truffaut and Godard that show how many people are involved in the process of making a film. It seems that their lasting impression has been that the auteur theory, that a director is the only person whose attitude and presence makes a film happen, which is just, speaking as a filmmaker, speaking with a filmmaker, is just not true. There are so many voices that come through. And as you were saying, one of the things that this film lays out clearly, consistently, is there are hundreds of voices that you hear from in the film, from people who end up being extras, to people who are day players, to people who are in front of the camera, people who are behind the camera. You have all this variety of voices speaking, and that's actually what makes a film. And while somebody who can be viewed as problematic, someone like Mamet, can sour an opinion on a film because of their stances, it doesn't negate the idea that the rest of these people went to work, made a film, did a job, and moved on with their life.
Yes, and that's why we're challenging you as an audience member to look beyond the artist with whom you have a complicated relationship and look at the art as its own entity. As we've said many times in this podcast, my favorite quote from the Oliver SAS film, Clouds of Sils Maria, the text is an object and it changes perspective depending on where you're standing. And I love that in reference to this specific conversation, because what it's reminding us is that the art that you are admiring or not admiring will change perspective depending on where you are in life, depending on your experiences, depending on what you're struggling with at the moment. In fact, one of my favorite Ethan Hawke quotes, he goes on about how poetry is not a luxury because when you're in the depths of despair or in the highest highs of romance, you need poetry to connect with. So same thing with art and film. You need it when you need it. Mm-hmm. And even though the artist that may be the name behind the art is complicated, you should still explore the art and get to know it for yourself, because it is a conversation with you now. Now it's about you and the art.
Yeah.
And so this is a whole beginning that we're talking about, the complicated relationship, because as you mentioned, Austin, David Mamet is a really complicated artist.
Right.
He was really important to me when I was in our early stages of becoming filmmakers as 20-year-olds, fresh out of college, exploring the idea of traveling from theater, away from theater and into film. Mm-hmm. And I looked to him as a resource for a lot of important guideposts for our career, which have proven to be very useful. But he's much more recently, in the last decade or so, become a really toxic person for me.
Yeah. And I think that there's an element that you're saying that I want to underline, which is that you can have a relationship with the art that is separate from the relationship with the artist. Mm-hmm. That you can listen to a song and really have an emotional tie to where you were in your life and where it played, and then you can find out that the person was a monster. Mm-hmm. You can have a relationship like we have with Mamet, where when we were starting out on this path, I fell in love with the idea of there is no plan B, because if you have a plan B, you're going to fall into it because you've already set that out.
Yeah.
So don't have one. And there are a lot of ideas that he presented into the world that seem really good and have been very helpful to me, even if my relationship with him as a person has become more and more unrelatable, or has, as you said, has become a little bit more toxic. And I don't know if we really want to go into any of his views, because you can search it out on the internet.
Yeah, look it up.
That's again, the relationship between the art and the artist can be separate, in the same way that I still think that Diane Keaton's performance in Annie Hall is phenomenal.
Oh,
and whatever your relationship to Woody Allen is, you need to separate that to recognize, or it benefits you, in my opinion, to separate that, to look at how good Diane Keaton is, how good, say, Catherine Deneuve is in Repulsion by Roman Polanski. Mm-hmm. There are tons of artists out there that have really toxic lives, who turned out to be not who you'd want them to be, who needed to be knocked off the pedestal either they chose to be on or society put them on. And that doesn't change our relationship to the art that was created with them.
A great example to support what you're saying, Austin, is in fact in this film with the doctor. When Philip Seymour Hoffman's character asks the doctor, "Aren't you supposed to set a good example?" And his response is, "No, I'm just supposed to hold your hand when you die." Mm-hmm. And that's the question you should ask yourself when you're angry at an artist for their beliefs or their
for not
policy.
Living up to your standards.
Exactly. Whose expectations are you asking them to live up to? And you can love the art and despise the artist if you want to. That's okay. It is its own entity. When it goes out into the world, it becomes its own entity because it becomes something special for you. Your interpretation of the art is the final piece of every art piece. We don't talk about that enough, but that's the truth. art exists, and how you interpret it is the final piece that the artist has put out for you to interpret. When we made Self-Tape, which is a short film of ours, and it's an absurdist sci-fi piece that's available on YouTube. You can look it up. Please do watch it, Self-Tape. We do not explain what it is about on purpose because you're the final piece of the film. The point is for you to watch it and interpret it how you wish and you fill in all the holes the way you want to, whatever way inspires you. And I imagine it'll change within 10 years. You'll feel differently about it than the way you do tonight. And that's the point of art. You are the final piece. Like, own that piece and be proud of that piece because you are bringing something to the table every time. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
So screw the artist. Support yourself as being part of the art.
Any artist worth their salt doesn't want to fill in all the blanks. They want you to do some of the work. I think about, I don't remember who said it, but it stuck with me, this idea that I don't need to see an actor cry. I want to hear the audience cry. Because what I want is a response from the audience. I don't necessarily always need a response from the actor. Like, I think about Jacques Rivette or even David Lynch, who both are and were incredibly obtuse when it came to what does a film mean, because they're like, that's for the audience.
Yeah.
If I tell you, then you're going to believe me and not yourself.
Yeah.
And a power that we have as audience members is believing what we saw. You think about all the fanboys and fangirls who have in some ways gone off the deep end with things like Star Wars, but they care so much because they fill in all these plot holes. They fill in all these narratives because they're invested so heavily with how they're going to fill the holes in rather than just leave them holes out in space. Mm-hmm. And there's something really important about that as a director, as a writer, as a cinematographer, to be like, here's some holes, fill them in, figure out what happened. Enjoy your own imagination while you play in the world that I have created.
Yes.
Or that we have created.
And so that goes into the we, right?
Yeah.
When you are faced with a question of whether or not you want to explore this artist, such as you said, Woody Allen, whose work I love. I love Woody Allen's films because I respect and honor the idea that there's a shit ton of more people involved in making a Woody Allen film than that guy. Mm-hmm. And whatever his complicated relationship with his family is, it ain't none of my business. And I don't want to get involved. But I love his movies. I love them. Midnight in Paris is one of my favorites. Annie Hall, Manhattan, these are great films. These films helped me be able to make our first film because I could see how simply and cleanly you can shoot things, how you don't have to get too big, you can keep it small budget, and you can tell a really good story. That's important to me. And so that is why we're here today to discuss State and Main.
And one last bit about Woody Allen and those films. I think that it's interesting, and when we talk about State and Main in a minute, it also applies to that. I think it's really interesting the fact that these films that you're mentioning all show characters who are modeling bad behavior. And they are acting poorly, consistently. And I think the read that a lot of people have had on them is, oh, we should identify with them and see ourselves doing these acts and being like them instead of criticizing these characters for being bad, for being ill-formed humans who are relying on like lecherous and devious motivations to get ahead. Mm-hmm. And I think that our visual literacy is such that we want to believe everything that we see on screen rather than question what we're seeing as being a good behavior.
Yes, I totally agree with you. There is a pattern where audience members often identify with the main character because the camera's there, because you're getting their POV, because you're in their face. And so automatically you've put a camera on something, you think, oh, I need to engage with this. Mm-hmm. But it is really exciting if you go, well, yeah, I might be engaging with it, but I can still be critiquing it. I can still be questioning it. I can still find it toxic. And there is a lot of literature and a lot of films where you should be coming from that perspective. Is this narrator reliable? And should you be asking a lot of questions?
Mm-hmm. And along with that, I think one of the things that if you talk to anybody who's seen any work by Mamet, either on stage or on screen, the things that people will say, or the things that I have heard people say, is there is a lot of performative acting, that it's not a naturalistic style. And for me, that never bothers me, because I come from a background where I watched Robert Bresson and other directors were like, I want to strip these actors of any of their personal traits so that they are just modeling behavior that audiences can recognize and then make their own judgment on. I think that Mamet does this in a more naturalistic manner than someone like Bresson, but there's still a stilted, very actorly or directorly style of performance that's involved in the making of his films. And I think that allows us to look at these pieces of art, and specifically now State and Main, and look at what they're performing, what performative acts are taking place in the film, and how are they representing what they're presenting. I think the first thing that I find interesting about this film upon rewatch and recent mindset is how masculinity is performed by the characters in this film, from Bob Berenger, who's played by Alec Baldwin, to William H. Macy's director, to Philip Seymour Hoffman's writer. Like, there are very different versions of how masculinity is performed. And to that degree, like, also femininity, how that is performed by Rebecca Pidgeon, by Julia Stiles, by Sarah Jessica Parker. We have
Patti
LuPone, Charles Durning. Like, we have so many actual strong characters written in this that are written and performed in a very specific manner that we can look at how they're being presented to us and see what is being said about them. Like, we can, like, if you want, we could start with Bob Berenger, the true fucking villain of this film.
Oh yeah.
Like, this lead actor who is a serial statutory rapist who has made multiple productions go from place to place because of the trouble with the law he gets into, and how everybody covers for him, which is, I mean, like, it's not too far-fetched to recognize that in Hollywood.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Miramax.
Yeah, so we have this performative masculinity. The first time we see him, we learn about his weights getting shipped in. See
they mail his weights instead of just bringing them with him, because it's not going to work out with the Waterford Huskies.
Right. We see him trying to relate to a male child, and going, baseball, that's a national pastime. That's an American sport, or whatever.
He says, baseball, Chuck, that's the national sport.
And it's so amazing, because he literally has nothing to say.
No, he's a robot.
He has nothing to say. He says later, he's like, I know all my lines, I just don't know what order they come in. And that's literally how vacant he is.
Oh, yeah.
As a character. He's
arguing with the director at one point how he doesn't want to do those lines because his character wouldn't do that. He would give him a wave, discard him, but he wouldn't say, it's a nice evening. It's such a great line. My character wouldn't say, it's a nice evening.
And if you...
What a stupid thing to argue about.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it shows an incredible amount of entitlement within his character in the film, and not an entitlement that you should probably identify with, because with all the other shit that we know from the jump, that they have come to this second town because they have to get away from his legal issues.
Yeah, no, it definitely appears that, since David Mamet also wrote this film, that he doesn't have a very high perspective of actors.
Right.
Because his two main actors are fucking nitwits.
Yeah.
Beautifully played, I might add. Exquisitely played by the actors in the film.
Yeah, by Alec Baldwin and Sarah Jessica Parker.
Sarah Jessica Parker's Claire is extraordinary. I love it. And
I think you know what I mean.
And I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend that if you guys can get your hands on a DVD copy of this, you listen to the commentary track with the actors, especially Sarah Jessica Parker, because she talks about how she could not stop laughing over the fact that all she had to do was take off her top, and her character was wailing about it for 20 minutes in the film. And she just thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so, but the thing is, okay, and we'll get back to the spectrum of masculinity. The thing is, everything in this film is extremely realistic. Especially, I'm not going to go into the statutory rape part just yet, because that's just so awful and true. Happens all the time. But in terms of our own sets, more on the smaller side, the arguing about line readings, the arguing about whether or not a character is going to do that thing or not, about whether or not they're going to take off their top, all these things are things that you do spend a lot of time managing with actors. And I just love that he put it all in there to say, see, it's not really that fun to be on set.
And yes, it's a funny thing because from my perspective, it is those arguments are really fun. They're just draining at times because you have other things that you want to accomplish. Like all the times that William H. Macy's character, Walt, wants to just go and get the job done. I want to get into the scene. I want to get into the nitty gritty of like making this movie and working on the actual magic in front of the camera. But the amount of time that you end up spending wandering through corridors that you don't know where they're leading to, and you're hoping that you're eventually going to get to set, but you fucking don't know. Like, it's time consuming and it's tiring, but as a director, I can understand actors' like concerns and questions, because when I've written something or when we've written something and we're asking them to play it, I have to articulate what's in my head to another person who doesn't know me as well as you do. And when the actor is sitting there going, well, I don't get it, and all I really want to say is, well, just walk across the stage. Just walk. Like, think about not tripping and walk. And they're like, but that's not my motivation. I need a motivation. I have to realize as a director also that they need a reason to be doing things, just like we need a reason in our actual day-to-day lives to go to the grocery store, because none of us want to do that unless we know we have to get there. And for the most part, we still don't really want to go. Like, there are so many things in life that are easy to understand or easy to articulate back into acting because you need a motivation to do something at all. I need caffeine. I'll go get a coffee. I need this. I'll go do that. I want entertainment. I'll go to the theater. Like there's things that you have to articulate in your own mind to make these things make sense. But that doesn't mean that going to the grocery store isn't draining.
True.
So it's like, what's fascinating to me is about what you're saying is that there is so much realism in it, but it's pitched at such an interesting satirical manner. Like, this film, for all the things that we've even just started kind of touching on, is a satire. It's a satire of Hollywood. It's as black a comedy as anything that comes out of the UK. Like any of the young ones, the Father Ted, like any of that shit. Like, it's all heavily leaning towards this darkness that actually is kind of true, that we all understand is true about these worlds, but we can pitch it in a kind of comedic manner with the right energy and the right tone.
Thinking back on your statement of the stylized way that Mamet writes to give distance to the audience, to say it is a satire, it is a comedy, you should distance yourself. Don't put yourself into the shoes of these people. I love his style of writing. I love how beautifully he writes his lines of dialogue. They are stylized and unrealistic, and the way I wish I spoke. He plays with words in such a way that they're just fun to dance on your mouth. You want to repeat the lines. I've memorized most of this movie. I love it so much. And it's so fun to hear the actors play with his text, especially because I think a lot of people don't understand his stylized performances that he requires of his actors. As you mentioned, people don't have a lot of literacy with it. And that's okay. I highly encourage, this is a great entry point, because if you haven't explored much of his films, you can then go off and see Heist, which is another one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, that film's fucking great.
And nobody does Mamet like Gene Hackman. Mm-hmm. Gene Hackman is the best at Mamet.
Yeah, as much as William H. Macy grew up with Mamet and trained with Mamet for almost his whole youth, like Gene Hackman makes it sound natural.
Yeah.
Like also Delroy Lindo and Danny DeVito both make it sound like they're actually just talking to you, but they're saying all the Mamet shit, and you're like, oh shit, you can in fact say this like a human being.
Yes, it is. It is a testament to your acting ability to be able to handle his lines.
Yeah.
And make them sound normal.
Yeah.
Make them sound like this is the world you live in, and it's not unusual. But I know that his preference is the way that Rebecca Pidgeon does it. I know that he really coached her to do it in this very staccato way. And while I find, if you look at the reviews from the time of this movie coming out in 2000, people did not like her performance, and they do not like it when people do Mamet's work in that staccato style with breaks.
And that's still true today. People really like find it abhorrent.
I love it, but I trust the process. And I love Rebecca Pidgeon's performance, because how amazing is it to have the character of Annie is everything that Joseph Turner White would want in a partner. Mm-hmm. A woman who runs a bookstore, who has a printing press, who makes theater for the sake of making theater, who has no big budget tied to her. And she is just doing the art for the sake of the art and loving it for the sake of the art. I mean, she is his ideal and he is hers. The two of them get to make art together. Mm-hmm. And it's so exciting about where they're going to go. And her performance of being the staccato, well, I guess you're going to have to change the title, is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't want all my characters to flow beautifully between the lines. I think there's a much more realistic representation of life by having people say things in a staccato way, because I have plenty of friends who talk this way. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they talk in this kind of staccato pattern because that's how they think and that's how they process the world. And so the idea that you would never have that represented in film really bothers me. And I hate that people hate that perspective, because I feel like they're not being realistic about life.
Yeah, it's what I find interesting about it is if we pair off some of these characters, we pair off, say, Julia Stiles and like maybe not Julia Stiles. She's an interesting one. She doesn't really pair with anybody really well, because I think that Alec Baldwin and Sarah Jessica Parker pair.
Yes.
The Philip Seymour Hoffman and Rebecca Pidgeon character pair. Mm-hmm. Maybe the Julia Stiles character actually pairs with William H. Macy, because they both...
Yes, like, they do. They are directing their life.
Yeah, as ludicrous and horrific as it kind of sounds, Julia Stiles' character, and this is, I know, shit that people are uncomfortable with and that they were uncomfortable with at the time of its release. She knows that Bob Berenger likes kids, and she's playing a character that's underage, so she goes and does what she wants to do. She's very directive, and this is an issue that Mamet has had in Back to Oleana, of people going, women are vile, awful people who will just come and take your jobs. They're trying to hurt you. All this kind of, like, all this feminist readings of it, which I think are true, but also if we just look at what her character is and we look at these kind of pairings, they both the William H. Macy, who just wants to get his film done, I'm going to do anything I can to get the film done, and is not doing anything less abhorrent by manipulating everybody around him to get the things done, from lying about the lilacs to get to
Town's out of lilacs.
This is what you do. You go to the broad's room, you take the lilacs, you wrap them, you get a note, you say a card from Marty, and then you give it to her. He is constantly manipulating every motherfucker around him in a way that is somehow more socially acceptable than what Julia Stiles' character is doing, because of the absolute right morals of you shouldn't have sex with an underage person.
Well, it's statutory rape, end of conversation.
Right. But like, I just don't want to be confused with saying that I believe that her character is doing something right or anything. It's
interesting you bring it up, because the New York Times, in the review that I really didn't enjoy, one of the things he says is the aggressively seductive teenager. Basically, he goes on to say, the aggressively seductive teenager whose family caters the film's crew's meals becomes more prey than predator, as in Bob becomes more prey than Predator.
Ugh.
As in, she's the predator. And while I know she is very much going for what she wants, it is...
She's still a child. She doesn't know what she wants.
To me, the article is written in 2000, and it showcases a man's 2000 belief that a woman could do this when she's not a woman, she's a child. And that's the challenge, is that he's cast a girl who's actually, I don't know how old Julia Stiles is in this, but she had to be 20 or something. Yeah. And so that's the other problem. Like, this character, she does a great job in the part. I love Julia Stiles. She's fantastic in this part. It's just, it would have landed a lot better if they actually cast a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Because nothing happens. We never see anything happen. So it would have been perfectly acceptable to cast a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old this part. And then talk about ick. I mean, the ick factor would be through the roof.
Right.
But because you cast a woman who's 20, 21, the ick factor isn't really there visually. So the visual literacy is off.
Yeah, we understand her to be a woman, so we are somehow released from the responsibility of judging the scene the way it actually should play.
Right, because you get the line, but it's all in the text.
Yes.
It's all there. There's the line, I'm getting this wrong, but basically he's called out, the producer's called out for traveling with statutory rape law books with him.
Yeah.
And that Claire's amazing line, "You treat me like a child, that's why I can't come."
Yeah.
When you interpret that as not, oh, he's being patronizing to her, but oh, he's talking to her as if she's 14.
Yeah, it's all horrifying. Like,
all there.
Like the girl was never here. She was never in the car. Like, all the things that are said that suggest how duplicitous the Bob Berenger character is, how duplicitous, or how much of an accessory Walt is, Marty, the producer, everybody is.
Everyone.
In trying to make sure that this horrific fact doesn't come to the surface. And that is, as you said, just in the text of the film.
Yeah.
And to counter all this, something that I find really, really interesting, and getting back to your point about Rebecca Pidgeon, is that Pidgeon is odd as an actor. She says things weirdly. She says things very staccato, and as you said, and I think this is a great point on it, she's speaking as if she's thinking, like in stilted half thoughts that she's readdressing as she's going. And it is very gear shifty, and that makes a lot of sense for her character. It also makes sense for why Philip Seymour Hoffman's character falls in love with her, because here's a person who's thinking out loud.
Yeah.
And he's a writer, and as a writer, that is so attractive to hear somebody process an idea in front of you actively, genuinely, and honestly. Like, we're all looking for that in everybody that we meet. We want to hear their honest thought. I want to know what you're thinking. Like, those refrains of dialogue echo in this film of somebody who is looking for somebody to tell them a thought that is new and interesting and inspiring. And that is everything she does. She is happy to try this life as it comes to her. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is so fucking good in this film.
He's so good.
It just, like, there's so many things that make me sad about his life ending as early as it did. And one of them is the fact that he didn't do more rom-coms or more romances, because that guy had so much fucking heart and soul. Like, we were watching that clip from A Woman Under the Influence, and seeing Peter Falk, I was just sitting there thinking, Peter Falk and Philip Seymour Hoffman have so much in common in their kind eyes, the way that they looked at their scene partners, the magnitude of weight they could both convey and internalize seemingly simultaneously. And there's something so incredible about that. And his performance here, this man who is going through the only moral crisis in the entire film, trying to make a decision that will impact his life, his livelihood, everything about him. Yeah. Constantly, from the script is falling apart to I'm the only person who saw Bob in the car with the underage girl. Like, all of these crises of faith that he has to go through to decide. And while the film in the end chooses to go, well, there's none of these things really matter, because there's going to be money and money will solve all of these issues. They're good. All the issues are going to go away. $800,000 will solve a lot of issues, is what the film is trying to say.
Yeah.
And it does.
It does.
And they make their film, and the legal system goes away, and all the problems go away. But it doesn't mean that the process of figuring out what your morals are and finding the person that you love is less important.
Look, Mamet told us in 2000 what took until, 2021 for Harvey Weinstein? When did
2020?
Whenever finally those goddamn cases came out. You know, it's look at Louis C.K. You know, he told us in 2000 this shit was happening behind the scenes and how it was being handled and how you were going to be completely blackballed in Hollywood if you were the whistleblower and how it would destroy your career. And it was really interesting that he chose to use a playwright to discuss that with, because what you see within this film is an opportunity for the playwright to explore actually being a whistleblower and being ready to be said whistleblower, because he was on an alternative path to say, yeah, I don't have to do film. I can do theater. I can move to this small town and write and own a paper and co-own a paper with this incredible woman who has a printing press and needs a town newspaper and owns the bookstore. You know, I have this opportunity to have a completely different career path. And so it's that space that he's saying, this is all happening and I'm making a movie about this happening and nobody's talking about it, even though I made a movie and I made y'all laugh about it. But this shit's happening.
Yeah.
And everybody just turned their blind eye, just like everybody does, always does. And so, I don't know. I love that he did that. I love that he tackled this really difficult subject with incredible humor and grace.
And I think that, like, to kind of highlight your point about Philip Seymour Hoffman character, I was reading an interview with Michael Keaton today. And he was talking about, the interview was asking him about his comeback. And he was like, I'm not really sure that I ever had a comeback because I was working all the time. I've always been a working actor. And one of the things that he said that I thought was really interesting and ties into this is that he said, I don't think as an actor you can ever get to a place where you're desperate. Because if you're desperate, you're going to do things you regret. But you can always be concerned. And so thinking about Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in those terms, his character is concerned. He's concerned about what's going to happen, but he is presented with all these other options that could be a different and fun life for him, something that he is interested in this town with this woman and maybe exploring. So he's not desperate to keep his job, which is kind of the struggle that he's going through. The first time that he goes to the fake court and he lies, he's kind of desperate because he doesn't know what to do. But then he gets a second chance, and his second chance, in this case, he doesn't make the same mistake. He goes to tell a different truth because he's no longer desperate. He's concerned about what's going to happen, but he's not so desperate that he has to hold on. And I think that that's something that's like interesting and runs throughout this film with all the other characters. All the characters who are tied to this film are desperate for it to be made rather than concerned about what's happening. And so they're making their choices out of this desperation. When you tie yourself to an anvil and wade out into the ocean, you're desperate to stay above the waves. But if you never tied yourself and you're just floating there, you're concerned about maybe floating out too far, but you're not concerned that something's going to pull you down.
So why did we pick this movie to discuss today? I wanted to talk about it because it is probably one of my all-time favorite films. It's not shot in a super extraordinary way. It's not acted beyond the scope of imagination. It's not this epic experimental piece or anything super unique, but the craftsmanship in it is extraordinarily good. This is really good work by everyone. Nobody gets in the way of anything. There's no big chunks missing, nothing that's out of proportion. But it's such a good story, and the lines are so fun to chew on. And at the end of the day, this was a really important film for me because it came about when I was realized, it came out a couple years before I realized that we were going to explore the path of becoming filmmakers. I was always a writer. I was always really into literature. I was an English major and theater, and film was never on my radar. And then I met you, and we started making theater together. And then suddenly we were going to start making film together. And so we explored making film together. And then before I knew it, here we are off to film school in Ireland to study and fully immerse ourselves into becoming filmmakers, which we have been on that path. This is 20 years now since we graduated from grad school. And it was so important to me because it felt like a guidepost, like a playbook on how to tackle the world of filmmaking and what I should expect from the craft. Mm-hmm. And I think what I love about this film is all of the murkiness of it all. Like there's so much awfulness in it, for sure. But also, it's amazing. It's just a job. Mm-hmm. It all boils down to it's just a job. If you pull back the curtain,
sure beats working.
It sure beats work. Oh my gosh, we say that all the time.
Yep.
It sure does beat working. This is such a fun career. Mm-hmm. It's so silly. It's so fun. We get to make art, mm-hmm. and I love that. And that's the perspective I always needed. Was you were going to have people that were going to tell you need to put Bazoomer.com in a film shot in the 1800s. Mm-hmm. Figure it out. We got the art department has some ideas on how to pull that off. We need to get that extra money in. Okay. I mean, you could argue about the integrity of art and how you have to be this artist that is the sole voice of everything, and you have to be in control of it all and all this other shit. And that's not how it works when you make collaborative art. No. It just isn't. As we said, there are a lot of voices in the room. There's a lot of personalities that you have to all get on board. And how fucking cool is it when you can get everybody on board to make the movie? Mm-hmm. The best or not, it's with the gods.
Yeah.
You just have to do it. And that's what I learned from watching this film was the best or not is with the gods. You just have to finish it.
Yeah.
Finish the art, push through, get it done, be kind, and definitely none of the statutory rape shit.
Yeah.
Like none of that crap.
Yeah.
But like be kind, work together, collaborate, and you get to have a bit of magic at the end of that.
Yeah. And I think that another thing that the film taught me, or a thing that the film taught me, is that there's a lot of times where the people that are in front of you are actually who they say they are. Mm. Like, listen to that. Like, there are a ton of Bob Berengers in the world. Like, they may not be as bad in this specific way, but if they're telling you something about themselves, you should probably fucking listen. Yeah. I think about making Citywide. I can't believe that there wasn't a part of me that was aware of how the mayor and his wife were treated in this film, which inspired or influenced me to be like, okay, so in the shops that we're going to shoot in for Citywide, that I'm not going to forget about them. I'm going to talk to Dennis. I'm going to talk to Claire. I'm going to talk to the people who own these businesses that we shoot in and make sure that they feel seen and heard, and that I'm not just using their space and abusing them of it. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something really important about seeing the people who are honestly, genuinely there and seemingly kind and not taking advantage of it just because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's what happens. You take advantage of somebody because you're like, oh, well, they didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
Like, so why would they know the difference between me taking advantage of them or not? It's like, no, it's our responsibility to care for the other people that are in the room or giving you the space or opening themselves up to you. It's our job as human beings to care for the people that are in front of us so that we're modeling that behavior, that hopefully they model that behavior, and we kind of make everybody around us better. And I think that that's something that I take from this film, honestly, is that this is a film of showing you how not to model your behavior.
Yes.
Like, there are very few people, mostly Annie and Joseph Turner White. Those two characters seem to mostly be the ones that you can be, you can kind of model your behavior on them. It's okay to be searching for something, but be genuinely kind, be genuinely interested in searching.
I love Annie's character, Rebecca Pigeon. She's definitely who I think of when I think of our art that we try to model on. If you don't make it yourself, it ain't fun, it's entertainment. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite lines as well from the film. She is wonderful, makes her own art, creates her own projects, makes her own fun, and is having a blast. And I always think of her character. I mean, she has some of the most practical lines in the film as well. well, how do I make a movie called The Old Mill when I don't have an old mill? And she says, well, first you got to change the title.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Just calm down and change the fucking title. You know, it's such a great line. And she's so calm about it. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good place to start, you know? And yeah, I love her. I think she was a huge influence for me in our journey of filmmaking. And likewise, the insanity of it all was influential. How do you keep the insanity at bay? How do you keep the enthusiasm of Claire? So Sarah Jessica Parker has an amazing introduction where she swoops in with William H. Macy and Alec Baldwin and Philip Seymour Hoffman, and she says, you know, she's so excited about her first line. She's like, this line is why I'm doing the movie. The old mill goes round. And it's just this really stupid line. And she's like, how often in your life do you get a line like that? And you're like, well, hopefully not very often, because it's a terrible line.
Yeah.
But her enthusiasm is what's important. She is really excited to make this film. She's really excited about it. And that's what you want in your actor. So how do you foster that and encourage that and don't squash it?
And see that as a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting film. Like, there are so many things about it that seem like, we have friends that fucking hate it, who will just absolutely not even stand for a conversation about it because of all the things we've talked about in this podcast.
Yeah.
But I also feel like that's the honesty of the film. It's presenting you a world that is close enough to what we represent, and we have learned is closer than we wished it was in life. But that doesn't mean that we should turn our eyes, that we should we should gaze away, or that we can't look at it and go, well, it's kind of funny as well. Like, all of this is, like, as Louis Buñuel famously said, that the thing that he was going to miss when he died was reading the newspaper every day, because it's the funniest shit he ever saw. And you're like, yeah, it kind of is.
It really is.
Our repetitive nature and our belief that we are going to find a different answer or a different outcome is fucking hilarious. And the fact that most people seem to disregard the signs that are in front of them about the problems that they have or the problems that are arising is not on the piece of art itself to rectify, to moralize, or to tell you. But in fact, it's upon us to reflect on what the art says, reflect on who the characters are who are saying the things, and recognizing that maybe sometimes we shouldn't think that Michael Corleone is the best character in The Godfather, or that that's actually a film about good people.
Yeah.
That maybe, in fact, Breaking Bad is a TV show about bad people, and we should never think of ourselves. We should never get ourselves in the mindset that we're Heisenberg. We could see how he becomes that, but we should never idolize that. We should never idolize Scarface. We should never idolize the disassociation that's related to Fight Club. There are so many films that the message gets muddled by people who want to idealize bad behavior so that they can therefore be absolved of that bad behavior.
I think a great example of what you're talking about in this film is how often David Mamet has written lines that are just lies. They're just lies.
Yep.
And it's hilarious if you pay attention. So you have the scene where Annie is in the bookstore and she gets a phone call, and Joseph Turner White is looking for the typewriter, and she's on the phone with obviously a kid who's doing a report and is trying to figure out about Henry James. And she's like, no, he's the brother of the novelist, Jesse James, the brother of the novelist, Henry James. And you're like, wait, what is she telling?
And that is just not true.
And it's amazing. You're like, wait, because people are constantly wrong about shit. Later, you have William H. Macy in the bathroom with Sarah Jessica Parker, and she's crying because she doesn't want to show her tits on camera because she didn't read her contract, which... yeah, I think that hangs pretty true. I do love the fact that at the end of the day, she's just asking for more money. And I'm like, girl, get it. Yep. Get your money.
Get it.
Good for you.
Yep.
But he's telling her this whole story of how back in the day, royalty couldn't get tickets to see this one performer do the 7 shows. So she could only do 4 because she was an actor. And, it's all bullshit. He's just making shit up. And it's great because I think constantly Mamet puts things in as fact, as truths that people are, oh, this must be a true thing that I'm learning from Mamet. And it's like, no, it's a fucking lie. He just made some shit up because he felt like it. And I think too often we take things as truth, like you're saying. Walter White is a bad motherfucker. Don't idolize him. Don't idolize The Godfather. Don't idolize The Sopranos.
I want to jump back to what you just said. I think he puts in lies specifically to make us not trust what's being said.
Unreliable narrator.
Well, unreliable narrator, but also just to be like, no, don't believe what's being said.
Yeah.
Just don't. This is a fucking lie. Like, this is a fucking lie. So don't believe everything that's being said by anybody. Don't believe this to be the truth about anything. Always believe this to be what you make of it.
It's art.
Yeah.
Interpret it as you may.
In that vein, another fucking quote that I fucking adore from it is Joseph Turner White and Annie are talking. Like, do you believe that? I do if you do. But it's absurd. So is our electoral process. But we still vote.
I know.
And like that. Like, do
you not really believe? Do you really think the electoral process is absurd? Watch your margins.
Yeah. But do you believe? I do if you do. Like, that is a fucking great synopsis for all the characters in this. Do you believe that? I do if you do. Like, that's all film. Like, are you going to believe that this fantastic thing happened in this fantastic film? I do if you do. Okay. It is an exceptional summary of so much of our existence. Do you really believe that? I do if you do. Like, it's in some ways you could argue that it's the constant refrain of a great marriage. Like, do you love me? I do if you do. Do you believe that? I do if you do. Like, there's you can never know. The existentialists were right, since you never know what any other person existing believes or can see or experiences. You just have to believe them when they say it.
And I love how in that line that it goes further. Wait, do you really think the electoral process is absurd? It showcases where his interest is in having. So not only is it exactly what you're saying, is this always question. Don't just buy things at face value. But also, he has a naked Sarah Jessica Parker in his bedroom, and he wants to talk about Rebecca Pidgeon's belief that the electoral process is absurd, which it is, and get into that conversation, like super nerd out. And you're like, yeah, I love that what you want to do is now talk about that, even though you have a naked Sarah Jessica Parker right on your bed. Yeah,
and her response is, watch your margins.
God, it's so good. It's just, it's such a good film because as much as he's telling us to like not believe anything, the characters are really, really well conceived, and the actors really embody them in a beautiful way. I mean, everyone, all the way down to, as you were talking about, Sarah Silverman's sister has a teeny tiny part, but does a great job with it. You have the incredible costume designer who is just getting shit on all the time. Poor thing, she's trying to get the work done, and she's just like, I got no notes and I'm off to do more costume designs. We're about to film in a couple of days. To the cinematographer who needs to get this shot. The whole point of the movie is in that shot, but there's a big stained glass window, and what do? You know, like, everybody has this wonderful character. Each of them is unique, and they get to live it, even if they barely have any lines. I love Doug. Yeah. Annie's fiance.
Love Doug.
The love of my life, love Doug. Oh, Doug is great. Yeah. And all the little guys that are just that fill in the scenes, that are just little potpourri around the scenes.
Yeah. And another line, and let me see if you can do the callback to this. Ready?
Well,
all right. So first line is, well, it takes all kinds.
Is that what it took? I always wondered what it took.
Yep.
I love that.
And God damn it, like, for as heavy as we've kind of talked about this film, like, there are things like that in it that you're just like, oh, that's just so fucking lovely.
Yeah.
Like, it's this kind of circular thought process of the characters have. Like, is that what it takes? I always wondered what it took. Like, it begins and ends at almost the same point, but it's such a beautifully rhythmic sort of verbiage.
Yeah. It's how you wish you spoke. At least I would. There's so many good lines. And it's interesting, too, because you could step back and say, oh, all the small town Vermonters have this wonderful cadence in how they speak and have these great lines. But it's not just them. Everybody has great lines.
Yeah. How are we coming with the dead horse scene? You can't actually kill the horse. Ah, fuck.
I love that line.
Yeah. The film is just full of these fucking wonderful little moments that highlight how well written and thought out the process is. And also like that, like you can't kill the horse. Well, yeah, I hope you fucking shouldn't kill the fucking horse. Like what? Like this is the 2000s. Why the fuck do you think you can kill the horse? Like, God damn it.
But somebody is asking that question.
Yep.
And that is what's great about this. We pull back the curtain and we see, you were telling me earlier today about The Notebook and how the incredible lead actor
Gina Rollins
got a note from producers that said she had to redo a line because she needed to cry. And she was like, I'm going to fucking kill you for giving me that goddamn note, you goddamn asshole. And that same person is probably saying, well, can't we just kill the horse?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is who's saying that line.
Yeah.
That person.
100%.
Asshats. Giving her a line reading. Jesus Christ. Have you seen her work?
Probably no.
No.
Like, no, I just, like she's a woman who's over 50, so she should probably just be raising the grandchildren. I may have to go to jail. I'll knit you a sweater. I'm going to be there a long time.
I'll knit you a jumpsuit. It's so good. There's so many good lines in this film. It's worth it to watch it just for the incredible dialogue. And I saw it again in the review in the New York Times, which I really didn't like. And then a couple other sources, I was reading other articles about it, and a lot of people talked about how this was very much just a play that somehow became a film, and they didn't understand why. And I'm like, because it's about making a film.
Because it's a film.
Really shouldn't make it a play. That would be really weird and dumb and also wouldn't work. But stepping back from that stupid comment, so what?
Yeah.
It's theatrical. Sure. Watch any of Hong Sang-soo. All of that could be plays.
All of Rivette.
Could be plays.
Yeah.
They could be. But yet we instead go, but we want to use the medium of cinema. And why are we using the medium of cinema? Because we want to tell this story in a different way. Half of the film is about being in small town Vermont. It doesn't work on the stage.
No.
You need to be there with the trees changing color and the beautiful little chapel in the center of town and the pothole that everybody hits all the time. That is the catalyst for the whole third act.
Yeah.
Like, the pothole is essential. It doesn't work as a play.
No.
And just because there's a lot of great dialogue doesn't thus make it not worthy in being in cinema.
Yeah.
There's plenty of great films that have no text, have no lines, silent films that are beautiful.
Ernst Lubitsch is out there saying, hold my beer.
Yes. I mean, God, Preston Sturges.
Yep.
Like, shut up. We have written plenty of incredible films with great dialogue, and they're fun.
We've also written 100 fucking Marvel movies at this point where there's not a good line in it.
They just don't need to exist anymore.
No.
I'm tired of their abstinence porn.
Yeah. It's not a lie. It's a gift for fiction.
I love that line. I love that line because it is the perfect encapsulation of the director. He is wrangling kittens. It's so hard to explain to everybody, but film sets are very different beasts. When you are running a film set, for some reason, every single person on the film set, except for the people who are running it, become 5-year-olds who can't read their call sheets, who can't handle their life anymore. They completely are incapable of handling anything, and the best you can hope for is they know their lines and what order they come in.
Yeah.
And it is hilarious because he's right. It isn't a lie. It's a gift for fiction because I need you to write the rest of this thing. And you are whining to me about a typewriter that you probably could have just carried with you, but you put it on some truck and we don't know where that truck went. And now we got to find you a new one. So just find one and write on it and get it done and stop wasting my time about it because you're the one who wants to write on a typewriter.
I remember when we started off, one of our first projects, we worked with Caitlin. And my favorite thing about Caitlin Clouthier was the fact that whenever she wasn't on camera, she was just reading a magazine.
Yeah.
in a very specific place. So you always knew where she fucking was.
Yeah.
And it was always so nice to be like, hey, Caitlin, oh, she's over there. She's reading a magazine. And she's like, I'm ready to go. Like, ta-da. And like,
She was great.
always remember to hire people that have a rich inner life that doesn't seem to take them away from the set.
Yeah. Who are perfectly happy to sit down with a book and entertain themselves until you're ready to roll. She was wonderful to work with.
Yeah.
That was for our Alpha States music video, the
And-
Irish band,
And Lost.
and Lost. Oh, Lost. Our first short film was called Lost. And we are probably going to re-release it at some point. We've got a couple things we want to do to it. And then
it's on Vimeo at this point.
it's currently on Vimeo, but we'll put it up on YouTube. But I think there's a little bit I want to do to it and then put it out there. But yeah, that was our first short, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And we learned so much on that set. And then off to grad school we went. It's such a great film.
Yeah.
I highly recommend watching State and Maine if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's one of the few things that I love for the nostalgia of it, because it reminds me of how I got to where I am.
Yeah.
And while I don't love nostalgia in general, like this film, like my relationship with it, much like that SES quote, has changed over time. And I find myself attracted and interested in different portions of the film.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a good film. It's such a wonderful discussion of Hollywood and the complexities of it. It's such a wonderful discussion of how hard it is to pull off something big like a movie. But it's also a wonderful reminder that, like, you can idolize small town rural America all you want, but at the end of the day, there's plenty of assholes and there's plenty of great people in every part of the country. No matter where you are, there's good people and there's shitty people. And that's just it. And that's what he talks about in this film. And I love that.
Yeah.
And if you are an aspiring filmmaker or a young artist, I would recommend reading some of David Mamet's earlier works, like
True and False.
True and False, On Directing, I think he did.
On Directing, yeah.
And he also did Writing in Restaurants, which was something that was really important to me. Also, he did A Horse Profession. All these works were really, really important to me as a young filmmaker. Like you talked about earlier, you referenced earlier, no plan B. One of the things he talked about was you can't have a plan B. And if you want to make film, if you want to be an artist, you cannot be like, but if it doesn't work out, I'll become a teacher. Or, but if it doesn't work out, I'll go to become an accountant. Because then you'll become an accountant. Oh, you'll become a teacher. And the thing is, 20 years later, after making films and two of us going, we're not going to do anything but make movies. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make film. We're going to make art. We're going to do this as our career. We've done it. And the thing is, I have a lot of people in our life that were artists that said the same thing, but all had plan Bs. And you know what? 100% of them are doing their plan Bs.
Yeah.
They are not making art.
We typically have like a stumble upon at the end of this, but I think almost that this is the best stumble upon we can give for this podcast. That I co-sign all the things that you just said. The On Directing, the True and False, Writing in Restaurants, and A Horse Profession. All of those. Stumble upon those. Find those books. Read those books. Know that the person who wrote them is a very complicated human being. But a lot of the ideas in those narratives, in those structures, will help you as an artist figure out how to make something. You don't have to love the artist to love the art. And I think that's the most important thing when I look at these people who become complicated and think, okay, they're not great human beings, but they've inspired some good thoughts. Like there are tons of artists that lived years and years ago that I will never have any sort of idea about how good or bad a person they were, just because we don't have access to the same sort of information that we do now. But their art, how it hits me, still matters to me.
Yeah. I cannot recommend his more current works
At all.
I would strongly recommend staying away from them. That's up to you to decide what you want, but I do not recommend them at all.
Basically anything written after like 2002
Yeah.
seems like problematic.
Yeah, just complicated, problematic, toxic, not good.
Yeah.
Not for me. So no, but his earlier works as an aspiring artist, please check them out. And I'm talking to anybody. I don't care how old you are. If you want to become an artist, explore that at any age. Explore it.
Yeah.
It is not just for the 20-year-olds.
Yeah. Our art has no time limit. Like we put that pressure on ourselves and and it's insane to consider that you have an expiration date. Like nobody knows what that is, and you shouldn't do that work for anybody else.
No, in fact, it's one of the things that makes me so sad about theater is that because it is not supported, because it is so hard to make a living as an actor in the theater, as a theater director, as a playwright, that what ends up happening is a lot of the works of theater for the fringe, I'm not talking about mainstream Broadway. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the small works of independent theater, are all made for and by and with like 20-year-olds because they're the only ones who can afford to keep trying until they're like, well, shit, I need more money to pay for housing or to maybe buy a house or to have a family or fill in the blanks, have any kind of retirement plan.
Yeah, it's time for me to get my real estate license.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. And what we miss out on is the wide spectrum of perspectives. So then our theater just becomes a bunch of 20-year-olds talking about 20-year-old problems, which gets real boring when you're 45 and you're like, well, I'd like to hear really different perspectives and different problems that you're talking about and see different ages represented. And so, yeah, we are definitely on the side of, please, if you are interested in exploring your artistic side, do it. Do it. Yeah. Please, we need more of you out there.
Yeah, we need everybody to be exploring their artistic side. Make your bad art. Everybody has shoeboxes underneath their beds of the plays, of the stories, of the films that they've written, of the paintings they've drawn, the photographs they've taken that will never see the light of day because we needed to make them to get to the point that we are today.
Yeah, 10,000 hours of crap.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of becoming an artist with a profession, like if what you want to do is make your living off of it, as we do, then definitely explore some of his earlier works because I found it really helpful because you can't have a plan B.
Yeah.
It's just too hard.
Yeah. And if Mamet isn't necessarily your thing, if he turns out to be too problematic or he just doesn't work for you, the other person that I would suggest that you look up is Sidney Lumet and his book Making Movies, which is actually the best book about making films that you could imagine. It helps you in all the different aspects, from costuming to directing on set to editing to working with actors. It is the most important book that I've ever read in regards to what a filmmaker goes through.
And I would recommend, as an editor, if you're interested in editing film, you read the book In the Blink of an Eye by Walter Murch. It's an incredible book. He's an incredible editor. Definitely explore that book if editing is something that interests you. Which, to go back a little bit, that was my first career in filmmaking, was editing. It is the predominant part of my job as a filmmaker is editing. And it was so exciting when I discovered it because I'd never heard of it before. And I was a writer and I was passionate about literature and reading all the time. And then suddenly I discovered there was an art form where you could take pictures and be in control of the story. So I was writing, but with film. And that's the best way I can think to explain it. You have all of these pictures, it's a giant puzzle, and you get to put it together, and how you put it together tells the story. And I don't think people realize that editors are the final writer of the film, because how they put it together is the story. Yeah. You can rearrange it in a bunch of different ways and tell really different stories, all the same footage. And that's so exciting. And when I discovered it, I was like, my mind was blown. This was a job I could do. I couldn't believe it. I was so excited, and I've loved it ever since. I still do. And so, yeah, definitely read the book In the Blink of an Eye. And so those are our stumble-upons, which are not films.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending this time with us again. Like we really appreciate anybody and everybody who listens.
Yes.
You guys are very much loved by us.
Please write in the comments on YouTube, send us messages on Instagram at Fishtown Films, reach out to us on TikTok. Let us know if there's anything you want us to discuss. Let us know what you think of these films. Engage with us. Let us know anything.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, all at Fishtown Films. You can watch our film citywide on Amazon or on Vimeo, depending on your preference, or if you don't want to pay the Amazon overlord.
You can use the code StumbleUpon for 50% off of the Vimeo rental or purchase.
And we very much appreciate all of the energy and love that any of our listeners want to give us. Like, you guys really are the reason that we try to make art. We want to see what the engagement can be, what you guys see and take from the work that we try to make art is a two-way street. It's a conversation that it's more than a two-way street, I would say. It's a conversation that you and I are having with the work that we're making, and it's a conversation that you, the audience, is having with the work that is in front of you.
So reach out to us. DM us on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's anything you want us to discuss in the future. And thank you for being here today and chatting with us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.